Singapore, known for its tropical humidity, spectacular skyline, having this in its airport, and since 2008, Formula One. For one weekend each year, the Marina Bay area transforms into a 5-kilometre F1 track that winds around the Singapore Flyer, the iconic Fullerton Hotel, and even across a century-old bridge. Without a doubt, Singapore is one of the most demanding circuits on the calendar. The intense humidity means drivers can lose up to 3 kilograms in body weight through sweat. And it's not just the conditions they have to battle, its high speed and tight cornered layout has meant a safety car has been deployed in every single race except 2024. But for most of the year, it looks like this. So a lot of infrastructure is needed to transform it into this. Thousands of people work around the clock to build temporary grandstands and install the necessary safety infrastructure. Then there's the lighting, which, as you can imagine, is no simple task to illuminate the track while providing the drivers with uniform conditions. To truly understand how the Singapore F1 track is built, we first need to discuss its design, then the build itself, its incredible lighting system, and finally, why it's one of the most dangerous circuits on the calendar. The origins of the Singapore Grand Prix go back a lot further than most F1 fans will know. It was actually first organised in 1961 to host Formula Libre, and it was known as the Orientier Grand Prix. Formula Libre literally means free formula and allows for a wide variety of purpose-built single-seater racing cars. In 1966, it was then renamed the Singapore Grand Prix. Just 7 years later, however, in 1973, the event was discontinued, likely for multiple reasons, including its extremely dangerous track and the inconvenience of having to close roads for the event. The idea of hosting a Grand Prix in Singapore became dormant for 30 years. That was until 2007. Bernie Ecclestone and Singapore signed a deal with a simple idea in mind. F1 needed something new, and Singapore wanted a global showpiece. The solution? Formula One's first ever night race. The initial track concept was made by Hermann Tilke, the German track designer known for many other F1 circuits, such as Baku, Yas Marina, and Bahrain. His design was then refined by KBR. They took on engineering, planning, integrating permanent and temporary elements, and adapting the design to Singapore's urban constraints. The main of these urban constraints was using the public roads in a dense urban area with little room to build new roads. Eventually, the track was finalised, and in its current iteration, it's 4.94 kilometres long, the cars do 62 laps, and they reach a top speed of 325 kilometers per hour. The cars pass through iconic sections like the high-speed Marina Bay Straight, the slow and technical Anderson Bridge and Fullerton Complex section, and the Raffles Boulevard. The track's had its fair share of changes since its introduction in 2008. Most memorable, perhaps, is the removal of the Singapore Sling Chicane at Turn 10, which had these very unforgiving curbs. It was no longer part of the track from 2013 onwards, and I think you can see why. More recently, in 2023, a new straight was added between turns 15 and 16, which has meant the current lap record sits a little over 1 minute and 34 seconds. So now we know how it was designed, how do they turn it from this to this? Singapore is different from a purpose-built racetrack because almost everything is temporary. Unlike other street circuits, however, like Monaco, the Paddock building in Singapore is permanent. The 350-metre-long structure broke ground in August 2007 and was finished by July 2008. It was originally meant to be 18,000 square metres, but it was expanded to 23,000 square metres. Its build cost was estimated to be 40 million Singapore dollars at the time, which adjusted for inflation now is around 45 million US dollars. A hefty cost, but it means one huge piece of infrastructure is permanently in place ready for each race. They also upgraded the pit building in 2023. 1,396 rooftop solar panels were installed, which should generate over 800,000 kilowatts annually, enough to power the pit building for a full month around the race. One of the first temporary builds happens in June, and that is the lighting structure, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Around this time is also when some of the grandstands around the pit lane are partially built. In August, the safety infrastructure begins to be installed, and they ramp up the construction of the other grandstands. Over the course of several weeks, a crew of over 4,000 people begin placing the 2,068 concrete barriers, erecting the debris catch fencing, and piecing together the grandstand modules. Much of this work is carried out overnight in an effort to cause as little disruption as possible to the public who use these roads. The city's roads are closed in phases as construction advances, and roughly 1 week before the race is when full closures are in place. But because the drivers race on the same roads that the public drive on, they have to carry out targeted resurfacing works each year. Essentially, they replace worn or problematic sections rather than the whole track, places that are prone to bumps, porpoising, or drainage issues. In 2022, for example, 3 sections were resurfaced specifically to reduce porpoising. Manholes, drains, and utility covers are welded, bolted, or sealed. Weeks before the race, the road markings are painted, which include the runoff areas and the starting grid. At this point, Singapore is basically ready to host a Formula 1 race. But as we know, it's a night race. So how does the lighting work? Singapore's race relies entirely on artificial illumination. Drivers need visibility, uniformity, and no glare, so a powerful and complex lighting network is needed. DZ Engineering currently carry out this task. The first step is to audit the inventory stored off-site to ensure everything is in working order before it arrives at the track. Then, the teams begin mounting floodlight pylons and trusses. Across the circuit, more than 1,600 LED floodlights are installed on low trusses, about 10 meters high, which preserves the city skyline and minimizes visual intrusion. Each of these floodlights weigh around 42 kilograms and have zero warm-up time, meaning they can instantly be turned on. These new Philips Arena Vision Gen 3.5 LEDs replaced older systems in 2023. Overall, more than 220 kilometers of cables need to be laid. By late August, the lighting system is mostly installed, so the focus then shifts to testing and troubleshooting. Engineers check for uniformity, glare, or flickering lights. Any misalignment could temporarily blind a driver and cause a crash, which thankfully hasn't happened in Singapore, but that doesn't mean to say it's not one of the most dangerous tracks on the calendar. I mentioned in the intro that the drivers can lose up to 3 kilograms of body weight during the race, and that's no joke. At lights out, ambient air temperatures tend to be around 30 degrees Celsius, with humidity between 70 to 90%. Now imagine what that feels like in the driver's cockpit whilst wearing a fireproof race suit and driving intensely for 62 laps. They actually feel temperatures closer to 60 degrees Celsius, and their internal body temperature can raise dangerously high to 39 degrees. So not only do they have to contend with trying to win a race and not crash, but also they're fighting dehydration, mental fatigue, and loss of grip on the steering wheel. That contributes to the fact Singapore has had a safety car every single year except 2024. But also, it's the tight corners, bumpy street surfaces, potential for rain, and the boxed-in feeling of the walls. The rundown to turn 1 saw this freeway crash between Max Verstappen, Sebastian Vettel, and Kimi Räikkönen. All 3 of them were out of the race before it really even began. Not all of the safety cars in Singapore are from accidents though. 2008 saw the infamous Crashgate. Nelson Piquet Jr. purposefully crashed his Renault, which essentially gifted his teammate Fernando Alonso the win. One of F1's most controversial moments. But one of F1's weirdest moments was this in 2015. A British man casually strolling around the circuit meant that the safety car had to be deployed, and then he was arrested. So yeah, Singapore certainly knows how to transform its streets into a race which can create some serious carnage. If you've enjoyed this video, I know for a fact you'll enjoy these other Formula 1 track builds in this playlist.